Get ready.
Welcome to my kitchen and the end of the island. So today I'm cutting up 2 briskets for service. This was for an event. This was a back to school kickback type thing. And the young lady that ordered these briskets, she orders from me pretty regularly. So when she calls and hits me up, she gets her briskets. Anyway, I'm going to be cutting up these briskets in my kitchen, and I'm just going to bring you guys along. So, first things first, take the briskets out of the pans, and I separate the jus from the fat. Because there were 2 briskets that were cooked at the same time, I just put them all in the same container. Though, I ran out of room in the fat separator. Link in the description for the fat separator. I get a quart container. We're going to pour off some of the jus, leave the fat. Throughout this process, I'm going to kind of talk to you guys about what it is I'm doing. There are a lot of you guys who love the way that I slice up briskets, love the way that I do this, and this is for you. If you're not a big fan of talking videos, this one might not be for you. Either way, if you are here and watch this far, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up button. I'd greatly appreciate it. Back to the action. So now I'm going to move those containers off to the side, or I will spill them. Ask me how I know. My wife was actually listening to an audiobook. I can't hear the audio in the video because the voiceover doesn't actually play the audio when I'm doing the voiceover. But if you hear talking in the background, just know that that is my wife listening to a book. She was in the family room listening to a book while I was in the kitchen. She was playing her Nintendo Switch and listening to a book while I was working. And then eventually she comes into the kitchen. She couldn't just wait. She was hungry. So she made herself breakfast. Alright, so here I am separating the point from the flat, as I always do. That fat line in between the 2 muscles is where I always separate the point from the flat. I always separate the points from the flats first, put the point off to the side. Coming back in, doing this on the second brisket. And if you just let the fat and the muscle tell you where to cut, you usually can't go wrong. I won't say you can't. Usually you don't go wrong. So I'm going to move the point up and over, out of the way. Move this one up and over. So I always flip the points over. And soon I realize, actually after a couple slices, I realized that I have the wrong knife. This was the serrated knife. I've been using the straight edge knife lately, as of late. So there, I switched out the knife and spared you the couple seconds of me digging out around in the drawer and everything like that. But the straight edge knife, to me, has been, I don't know, I found that I like it more than the serrated knife. So I've been using that consistently. As you see, slow, steady. Setting the knife up, taking my time, making intentional movements, making sure my fingers are out of the way, making sure the brisket is sliced nice and evenly. And this is for the most part in real time. There were some places or spots where I cut some things out. My wife talking to me in the background, or me going to get something or moving something. But for the most part, this is real time, me slicing these 2 briskets in about 20 minutes is what it took me. I can slice briskets faster, and I definitely can slice briskets slower. But this is about the pace that I do when I'm usually slicing briskets. You see that big, huge cutting board? That cutting board, I think, is 36 inches wide. Actually, I'll place a link down in the bottom of the video for the cutting board. When you go out to Custom Cutting Boards RS.com, make sure you tell Ian that Dash sent you. Dash from Steel Drum Smokers Barbecue. Get back over there. Alright, so as I always state, when I'm cutting briskets up for catering, I cut the pieces into like bite-sized pieces. The smaller the pieces are, the less people feel compelled to take a whole bunch of brisket. If I were to leave those in those thick slices, people would take 2 or 3 slices, which 2 or 3 slices of that full size, full length of that flat there could probably be close to a pound. So we break it up, make it into smaller pieces, and you guys see me all the time use the knife to pick up these slices. Just going to make sure that they're sliced and separated. Get all of that into the full-size catering pan. Now when I'm doing events, if I have 2 briskets, I will separate the point from the flat and put the point in one pan and the flat in another pan. Trying to keep it neat and tidy. And as you see here, I do this off of the side of the island so I can move from where the cutting board is to where the pan that I'm putting this all in. I'm going to get up all of the drippings, the droppings off of the cutting board and put those into the corners just to fill out the corner of that catering pan. Loop this around so I can put the next one in there a little easier. And let me get in a little closer, zoom in a little bit so you guys can see this process just a little bit closer. I do apologize. I do not believe that I stopped and pulled up any of those slices per se so you can see them like deep down. This cook I actually did on the #1 drum. I do still use the #1 drum. Those of you guys who've been around for a while know the #1 drum is the drum that basically started this whole when I started using the steel drums, and why I call my company Steel Drum Smokers Barbecue, because I started cooking in 55-gallon steel drums. So because this was just for 2 briskets, I decided I was going to, call the drum up. I used the drum, cook these briskets in the drum. And if I remember, I will put some links to there's a playlist of drum cooking videos. I will try to remember to put those in there. If I don't have a link up in the top left corner, actually top right corner, if you see this video and don't see those links, please don't hesitate to remind me to put the links in. Thanks in advance. Just taking my time, making sure that the brisket is cut all the way through before I move on to the next slice. about you, but I could go for some brisket right now after watching this over. Comment below, when was the last time you made a brisket? That end of this brisket was the one that was closest to the fire. I always cook my briskets fat side up. So that's when that piece right there started to pretty much disintegrate, is because that piece was closest to the fire and pretty much, I won't say overdone, but it's overdone in my opinion. There are a lot of people who like it that way. When it starts to fall apart like that, to me, that's a true telltale sign that that particular piece, that corner, is a little overdone. If I were making brisket beans, which I'm not for this particular cook, I would take pretty much almost that entire corner, and that would go into the brisket, to the beans, to make the brisket beans, since those pieces are kind of, I'll say, falling apart, but they're really falling apart. The best way I can describe it. Making some room, trying to get both of these points into this pan. Sometimes it's easier than others to get everything into one pan. If I were separating and putting each of the briskets into the pan, it probably would be much easier. The point takes up just a little bit less room than the flat does. Sorry if I said the point, getting these points, these are the flats. Those extra little pieces that are there, I try and get them into the corners and to any blank spaces or spaces that need to be filled out, so that pan looks full. Get all of these pieces off the cutting board. Trying to clean up the cutting board a little bit. Be careful when cleaning your knife and running your fingers across the knife. Do it on the blunt end of the knife and not the sharp end. Everyone was asking how I know. Alright. So now we have the first of the point pieces getting cut up. Now, first things first, I will cut with the grain, and I'll cut these pieces at about 1 inch wide, and then I'll come back and I'll cut against the grain. So now I'm going to slide the brisket off to the left, so I have my cutting area to my right. That little piece was pretty much nothing but fat. If I remember correctly, this piece was a lot of fat on there too. And we'll just start cutting. I try to cut this up into about 1/4 inch pieces, slightly smaller than 1/4 inch. You see, all of the pieces on that point where there was a lot of fat, I'm putting those off to the side on the far left. For those of you guys who are wondering what book my wife was listening to. She was listening to a book in the Joe Ledger series. Actually, she got me listening to it too. Just wasn't paying attention. I was obviously cutting brisket that particular morning. But if you have the time and energy and want a decent book series, the Joe Ledger books are really good. Next me right now. Alright, so back to this brisket. We're just steady cutting through. And again, this is real time. Not sped up, not slowed down. This is just me getting it done. Intentional slices. And any extra fat or pieces that don't have good mouthfeel go off to the far left. And they will eventually get thrown away. Now, I know some of you guys are probably chomping at the bit to get on your keyboards and tell me I'm doing it wrong. In Baltimore, where I am, people don't want to eat that. It's unfortunate. So as opposed to getting a complaint, I just don't even put it into the pan. Where you are, where people might appreciate the fat or might not mind the fat, is different. So this is how I do it for my customers, my paying customers. I always like to add that bit in for those of you guys who are backyard enthusiasts and want to come at my jugular. But this is how I've been doing it for quite some time for my customers in and around Baltimore. And they seem to appreciate what I do, and I sure as heck appreciate them. So we've come to an understanding that this is just what I do. So that knife is a little less than an inch wide, and you see those slices. When I slice it with the grain, they're about an inch thick. Again, for that same purpose, that same reason, the smaller those pieces are, the more they're going to stretch for a catering event. Primarily because, again, people won't feel so compelled to pick up, people pick up 3 or 4 pieces. If you have big pieces, they're going to take up that same 3 or 4 pieces, and that could be quite a bit of brisket, and it won't stretch as far as you need it to. So the smaller the pieces, the more the brisket will stretch. Here you see I'm cutting up basically almost the end of that point. And when I cut up the end of that point, you can see I turned it and I laid it flat. Turning it and laying it flat is still going to produce the same exact cut. And I zoomed in there because my wife is actually, this is when she came to the kitchen, and she was starting to bop around and bang around and make a whole bunch of noise. So I kind of was trying not to allow that to be a distraction. So I kept chugging along, and at this point I'm like, all right, let me just hurry up and get out of the kitchen, because obviously she wants to make breakfast. Cutting up the final pieces on the first point, getting it into the pan. Aluminum pan around. Let's get the next point out and ready. I'm just feeling for where the fat ends and where the actual meat and muscles start to begin. I square up the cut. Let's clean up the cutting board just a little bit. and we're going to get those slices with the grain that are about an inch or so wide, maybe an inch and a quarter wide. Do that first. Then I'm going to go ahead, and this is the cut against the grain. And these are cut into roughly 1/4 inch slices. Taking my time, just getting it done. So as you see, the audio of me cutting, you could like hear me cutting and hear her book playing in the background. I muted it because she started talking to me. Like, no, I'm not filming a video. To be fair, I don't think I told her, like sometimes when I set up the camera in this particular position, I set up the camera and I'm just filming. I'm not actually going to use the audio from the kitchen, if you will. Usually when I have the camera set up in this particular position, I speed the footage up or mute it and just have music over it while it's sped up and do a time lapse. But this is real time. 2 briskets sliced up for catering in about 20 minutes. Cleaning up the cutting board just a little bit, some of those seasonings falling off, just making it a little nicer, neater. And once these briskets are cut up, I'll cover them and I will get them reheated so that for this particular event, I took the briskets to the event and the brisket was warm. So once I put the briskets into warmers, I didn't have to warm everything up while they were waiting. I brought the briskets warm and put it right into the chafing dishes with the warmers, and I was out the door. Here again, you can see where I laid the brisket cut side down from when I did that cut with the grain, just to make it easier because it sits kind of proud and a little unruly when I don't lay it down that way. And at this point, I'm seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm like, all right, goodness, I'm almost done. One more piece. Ready to be finished. And this last end piece. Kind of chunk it. And I'm just going to put that into that corner right there. Alright, there you have it. This is the point. This is the flat. And I'm going. 2 thumbs up.
More butter, baby.